So welcome to today's presentation, Social Security for Australians in 2026, possible changes before the trust fund runs out. And I guess I would add to that possible changes given the current Trump administration. I'm Ashley Murphy, the founder and principal of Arete Wealth Strategists Australia. Here's a general advice warning, specifically for folks based in Australia. So the information provided here is general in nature and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, investment objectives, or needs. So if you are a client of mine, then of course, we're providing advice to you and making specific recommendations. And if you're not, you need to go and do your own research, or better yet would be to hire your own advisor to get guidance on these topics. Our YouTube channel has been growing in popularity, I'm pleased to say. So if you're interested in these general topics, you can see we've got 64 of these webinars have been posted up there over the last, 5 years or so. What I find interesting is that the living between two countries, the sort of blog that my wife and I did, remains one of the most popular topics. So people tend to like the human interest type stuff. The webinar from December is up as well. So Super Pitfalls, US Tax Treatment of Australian Superannuation. You'll see that there. Feel free to subscribe if this is of interest to you. So a little bit about me. Why would you listen to me on these topics? Well, I hope to make the case today throughout this presentation. But my background to this area is really, I was born into it. I'm a tri-citizen of Australia, the UK, and the US. I was raised in Brisbane, went to the University of Queensland, where I did a dual degree, then moved to the US in '05, worked as a corporate financial analyst before I followed my calling, which was to be a financial advisor, which I have been since 2010. So I was the runner-up student of the year at UC Berkeley Extension when I was going through that program. And I got busy networking, really with any financial advisors talking about anything to do with cross-border international type topics. I was interested in that. Okay, let me see here. So I've got a diploma in financial planning in Australia, and a very recent development is that I am an authorized representative of an Australian financial services license holder, which means Arete Wealth Strategists is the only firm that I'm aware of that can actually provide Australian advice and US advice with the one financial advisor. So why do I do all of this? My big why is this. It's to improve people's lives and enhance their possibilities by helping them make better use of their resources and streamlining their global mobility. And a lot of topics come into that. So things to do with one's legal status in a different country, exit taxes, figuring out the cost of moving, how do you move a retirement account, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let me see here. The types of clients that I work with, you can see, broadly speaking, these three types: Australian business owner living between the two countries, high net worth family, currently living in the US and trying to figure out their Australian responsibilities, and the Australian executive and family who has permanently relocated to the US. All right. So what do we have here for today? We've got some interesting things to cover. This is a little different to what I did a year ago, January of 25. It was the focus there was on the Tax Residency Act and also the recent change that had allowed for the WEP and the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset to go away. And so that was great news for Australian beneficiaries because it meant that your superannuation would no longer act to reduce your Social Security benefit, which was wonderful. But today I'm going to add a new twist to this, and you see this really with points 4, 5, and 6. So I'm going to do an update on Social Security and what these new numbers look like. That's really 1, 2, and 3. But then we're going to talk about this impending a bankruptcy of the old age and survivor insurance trust and what that might mean, as well as threats I guess a follow-on from that is threats to Social Security for non-residents, non-citizens. This is something that I've heard many times over the past year, and I thought it would really make sense to address this in an organized manner. And so that's what we've done here today. So, what is Social Security? For those that aren't aware, Social Security is the term used for that acronym I just mentioned a moment ago, the Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance Program. In the United States, it's run by the Social Security Administration. So Social Security is the benefit that's ultimately paid, which is generally paid to you sometime between age 62 to age 70. One may receive a benefit earlier than that at age 60. And in the unfortunate event of the passing of one's caretaker, there can also be benefits to minors as well. But that's way beyond what we're here to talk about today. So it's an income stream paid to you for as long as you live. It's inflation adjusted, and it's neither income nor means tested. So I always get a kick out of thinking that Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, all these billionaires, they get out their canes, walk to their letterboxes, and pick up their Social Security checks. There's no means testing of any kind. In 2020, for some interesting facts here, just to put the size of this welfare plan into scope, 2024, you're looking at 68.5 million Social Security beneficiaries. By April 2025, monthly payments to roughly 73.9 million beneficiaries totaled 134 billion for that month alone. That's what's astonishing. Right there, that's more than double the Australian defense budget. In 1 month, that's what gets paid out from Social Security. Now, the thing to keep in mind with Social Security is that unlike superannuation, which is essentially your account that is in your name, it is your property, with Social Security, it doesn't work like that. You really just have a claim to this vast pool. And so I tend to think of this metaphor of a lake. And so the lake is filled with money, and you're given a straw, and you just better hope that when you go to the lake and you suck on that straw, that there's enough money left in the lake. So you don't have a specific claim to a benefit. It is an entitlement program. So if you pay in, as is will be discussed in just a moment, if you pay into the program, then you're entitled to receive a benefit, but it is not a it's not a legal property right that you have. And there's a 1960 case that talks about that. So nearly 9 in 10 people receive it. This second minor bullet point here, I think is very important and telling to a topic that's going to come up a little bit later, and that is to eliminate or actually no one's talking about eliminate, to reduce Social Security, I think would be absolute political suicide. And here's why. Benefits provide about 31% of total income for this retired age group, with roughly 40 to 45% of older beneficiaries getting at least half of their income, and 12 to 15% relying on it for 90% or more. So let's look at those. 40 to 45% of older beneficiaries get at least half, and 12 to 15, it's 90% or more. That's to say almost half of the entire population of retirees in the US have this source of income as either the plurality or the vast majority of their income. So for someone to come along and reduce that, I just can't see that happening. According to recent international data, now pays around 760,000 beneficiaries residing outside the US. Do keep in mind, back in the golden age of the I guess it'd be late 1970s, early 80s, it was really thought that you'd have a tripod of benefits for retirement. So there would be the company pension. They've gone the way of the dodo, unfortunately. So the company pension, there would be the 401k, and there would be Social Security. Taken together, you would be looking at a very handsome retirement benefit, but they got rid of company pensions. We still have 401ks, and then Social Security is what we're here to talk about today. I don't think that's going away. I think taxes are probably just going to go up to make up for that shortfall. So how and when do you begin vesting in Social Security? So a US individual needs to have 40 quarters of coverage to fully qualify. So that's 40 quarters divided by 4. That's 10 years. The minimum amount you must have earned per quarter is $1,890. Uh, that's not $1,890 of tax into Social Security. That's $1,890 of taxable income. So that's really not that much money. It's not possible to earn more than 4 quarters. Therefore, over the course of a year, you need to earn at least $7,240 to actually qualify for a creditable quarter. Do note, and I'll be talking about this in a moment, totalization treaty, lots of syllables there in that phrase. And that is a treaty that Australia and the US and 29 other countries have with the US, where you get to actually totalize or add up your Social Security benefits if you've been globally mobile and never really stayed in one place long enough to earn the full benefit there. So you can actually qualify with as few as 6 quarters of coverage. I haven't seen it. I won't pretend that I've got first-hand experience with folks doing that, but I keep hearing about it, and no one has yet come forward to say that that is wrong. So it remains on the book. So Social Security for returned Aussies or Americans abroad. We've got a stick figure here, and I have to presume that's a flat white in that coffee cup there. So Social Security for returned Aussies. Okay, so it can either have some change to your benefit or no change whatsoever. So you've got to do your 40 quarters, as few as 6, as I was saying just a minute ago. Foreign pension coordination, I made a change here, got rid of reducing because with the removal of the reduction that came with the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset, there is no reduction anymore. So you can take your full superannuation benefit and receive your Social Security benefit and be in complete standing with the law. I happen to think in most cases that there's no impact. It's you get your Social Security benefit and that's that, provided you're vested in the system. Okay, so the other thing to mention, and I say this all the time, your US legal status doesn't have any effect on your Social Security entitlement status as the law is written today. So for clients who have given up their permanent resident, their green card, doesn't make a change. For clients, it is even as bold as this. Even for people who have relinquished their US citizenship, which people mostly do because of the three horsemen of the apocalypse that make up being a US tax resident abroad, namely the foreign taxes that need to be filed in perpetuity, or I should say the US taxes that need to be filed in perpetuity, the retirement benefits or lack thereof that comes with how superannuation is taxed and then how your 401k is taxed. That's the second one. And then the third one is to do with investment restrictions. So you can't invest locally in any old ETF or managed fund because the US has a punitive tax regime for that, known as the PFIC system, the Passive Foreign Investment Company rules. So we don't like that. And that's why folks tend to give up their US citizenship if they're very clear that they're going to be overseas for the rest of their lives. Okay, so if you happen to find yourself at a cocktail party, maybe this doesn't happen so much in Australia, but when you were back in LA, San Francisco, New York, you'd say, well, I'm looking at going back to Australia and I'm going to receive my Social Security benefit check. And then someone says, oh, you think you are? Well, you're wrong. It's going to stop after 6 months. Well, technically they're right, but if your country has a totalization agreement, then that doesn't apply. So that is the rule, but there are exceptions. You've heard me say this a few times now, what is this totalization agreement? So they're bilateral Social Security treaties between the US and other countries. As I mentioned, there's 30 of them as of last year, and they work to eliminate dual Social Security taxation. That would be horrible, by the way, because you're looking at paying your 6.2% employer contribution on your US tax, plus your 12% employer match in Australia, at least. That would mean you'd be looking at 18.2. I guess people don't worry too much about the 12% super contribution because it's the employer making that, not the individual. But in other countries, it doesn't always work that way. And so you could, in theory, have these social security taxes stacked on top of each other. But a totalization agreement works to remedy that so that doesn't happen. So you leave the US, you're no longer a US well, you're not a primary tax resident because if you're a citizen or a permanent resident, then you will remain a US tax resident. But you're not a primary tax resident. And remember, income is sourced to the country where that labor is performed. So if you're an American in Australia working for an Australian company, then the IRS won't be coming after your Australian employer for Social Security taxes. They won't be doing that because there's a totalization agreement and Australia is or the employer in Australia is making a superannuation contribution. It's going to preserve benefit eligibility and totalize credits from both countries and provide proportional benefits. It's particularly beneficial for those three that we see down there. One thing I've been interested to find out is I am pretty sure I have a theory here that totalization agreements probably came about due to the oil business and the number of workers that the Americans would have been sending abroad way back in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. That's my theory as to how these things came about, but maybe someone knows the history of that. Here are the 30 countries that I alluded to that have these totalization agreements. As you can see, it's mostly developed countries, many countries in Europe, South Korea, Japan, Brazil, Uruguay, interestingly, and Chile, and Canada, of course. Can't forget Canada. But notably, it's worth mentioning, notably not Mexico, no Central American countries, and also no Southeast Asian countries such as Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, et cetera, et cetera. So those base rules that I described earlier about you needing to be, you can only be overseas for 6 months, they would apply in those countries. So what is a totalization agreement? We've already been over that a few times, so we can skip through that. We've got a lot of slides to get through today as well, so I might move at a fairly quick pace. But do remember, please, if you register for the webinar, you're notified when the webinar makes it onto YouTube, so you can go back whenever it's convenient and see what has been said. Okay, so if an individual is eligible for Social Security, then their non-US citizen spouse is often eligible for spousal benefits, even if they've never lived in the US. I can just see the number of jaws that have dropped out there when I mention that, but that is absolutely a fact. I've had many clients that have never lived in the US and receive a Social Security benefit either as a spousal benefit. That means the worker, the American worker, they vested in the system and then they moved to Australia. So there's a spousal benefit that's paid or a survivor benefit. The American worker died and then there's an Australian spouse who continues to receive that benefit. So it applies to non-US non-resident aliens. There's that charming term that the Americans have, non-resident aliens living in Australia, meaning if you were a visa holder, a temporary visa holder in the US, and you vested in Social Security, you did your 10 years, you earned your benefit, you come back to Australia, well, you're entitled to receive that benefit as well. Christopher Knudsen writes, does the 6-month rule apply to the country you're currently living in or the country you were working in? It's the country you're living in, because the country you're working in would have to be the US, because we're talking about US Social Security. So it's the country you're living in. How do they know? I guess that's something strangely, I've never thought of that before. If you applied for Social Security in Australia, you went through the process and did all of that, and then you moved to the Philippines or somewhere, how would the Social Security Administration know that you're not? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not recommending it, but it's a question I'll be on the lookout for to hear if anyone has any experience with that. Okay. However, the rules pertaining to Social Security benefits should be verified as they're different. Yes, as I mentioned. So Chris, I've already answered that question. Next, can I receive benefits if I'm not in the? Yes, you can, of course. However, as we were just saying, you need to be in a country with a totalization agreement for that 6-month rule to not apply. Okay, what if my spouse and or dependents have never lived in the US? It's really just a different permutation of the same question. Yet again, an exception applies if a given country has a total. So you're probably beginning to get that sense that this is like that golden Willy Wonka type ticket. If you've got a totalization agreement, you're in good stead with the US to continue receiving your Social Security benefit. Looks like Stephen Andrew has raised his hand. Stephen, I'd ask that you write your question into the chat, please. So, what is the WEP and how does it affect my benefit? Well, good news is it doesn't affect your benefit. What happened was there was the Social Security Fairness Act that came into effect in January last year. One of the last things of the last actions of the Biden administration, actually, and it repealed the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. So, good news, this means it is not reducing your Social Security benefit. Office of Earnings and International Operations. For some reason, this always makes me when I think of that acronym, the OEIO. Is it was that childhood rhyme? Bingo was his name. OBING. I always think of that Bingo song when I hear OEIO. So it's the Office of Social Security Services for Individuals Living Abroad. So you're not actually dealing with the Social Security Administration. It's a minor technicality, but you're not dealing with Social Security Administration. You're dealing with this Office of Earnings and International Operations. The office that Australians work with is in the Philippines, and they are surprisingly efficient. They get things done. I just had a client recently, as in the last 6 months. Sadly, her husband passed away, and she's gotten in contact with them. She's never lived in the US. She's got a Social Security number. She's gotten her kid. She's too young actually to get her own survivor benefit yet, but her kids have gotten their benefits, and things seem to be moving better than expected. And we'll touch base again on this in a minute because there's a lot of doom and gloom in the news and online talking about defunding and inefficiency and so forth. But I haven't noticed that it's gotten worse than what it normally is. So Social Security 2026 update. What do we have here? During your working years, you pay an OASDI. What does that mean? Quick quiz. OASDI, Old Age Survivor and Disability Insurance tax of 6.2%. That's what you pay, and your employer pays 6.2%. So if you're self-employed, congratulations, you get to pay double that amount. There is a slight offset, I'm told, but it ends up being like 1.5% less. Either way, what's funny, just to take a brief moment to think about that, would you rather this, what ends up being 12.4% tax or 12% employer contribution in Australia, as your preferred system? It happens that Mercer and the University of Melbourne, they do an annual comparison of global pension systems, and Australia's it's in the top three. I believe it's the Dutch system, and I forget the other one, but and Australia does extremely well for having that vested benefit that is your property in your name, run by a trustee who has a fiduciary standard of care to do what is appropriate for the Social Security beneficiaries, for the superannuation beneficiaries and account holders. Okay, so if the wage base is 184,500, that means that you would contribute 11,439. So would your employer. So the total amount of money going to the Social Security Administration would be 22,878. And that's kind of the rub right there, is eventually the amount that the Social Security Administration is paying out, the average is more than that. And so it's going to run out of money by 2034. What qualifies as full retirement age for most people that have not yet taken their benefit, i.e., born in 1960 or later? It's age 67. My simple back of the envelope recommendation for clients, of course, you need to do your own research and look into this, but it's typically if you're in good health and you think you've got the finances and life expectancy to last beyond age 78 to 80, you're better off waiting till taking that Social Security benefit at age 70. Why is that? Because there's an 8% bonus that they give you on your benefit after your full retirement age. So let's say you're entitled to receive a benefit of $3,000 per month. That's US dollars, unfortunately worth a little bit less since this Greenland nonsense that Trump was on about back in mid-January, which saw the US dollar plummet at one of the fastest rates in my career, other than the global financial crisis and the COVID crisis. It's never weakened as quick as that I've seen. But aside from that, you're getting an 8% bump from age 67 to 70. So that 3,000 benefit, you'd be looking at 8% on that, and then another 8% on that, and then another 8% on that, and that would see your final payment be your final the highest amount you're going to get would be made at age 70. And then by age 78, that would surpass the amount that you would have gotten had you taken it earlier at age 67 or worse at age 62. We tend to avoid suggesting to people they take it at 62 unless they don't have very long to live, because you're getting a pretty substantial haircut compared to your full retirement age. How much Social Security benefit might you get? Well, good question. Go to My Social Security, log in, and take a look. It is a bit onerous to create what is it, MyGov or something like the US equivalent of that, to open one of those accounts. But once you've done it, well, here it is, login.gov and id.me. Once you do that, then you'll be able to log in and take a look at what your Social Security benefit is. So no need to guess about what that amount should be. And here's what I was talking about a minute ago. It's a good thing I just guessed at $3,000 a month. So whoops, if you took $3,000 a month, that would by age 70, that would be equal to $3,800 a month. So quite a bump in the amount that you get. Okay, now that's all well and good to talk about how much you might get, but that isn't very comforting when the very next slide is to do with the status of the Old Age and Survivor Insurance Trust Fund and possible changes that may be necessary there. Let me see. Hi, Cecilia. If it's running out of money in 2024, do you still advise delaying claiming? I do. Stay tuned. 2034. I do. And the reason is because it's so popular. It's a primary source of income for so many people. And there's a lot of support for just raising taxes to deal with that. That's why I say it. The other thing is you would still get the same benefit. So from whether you claim now or later, you're getting the same benefit, but this also the same haircut would apply. So you might get a full benefit now until 2034, and then at 2034 you get 19% less. Simple as that, and everyone gets 19% less. So that's just how this trust fund is projected to go. So previously it was expected to run out by 2035. That's going to happen. Oh, but that includes what is it called? SDI, the disability insurance program. So that's a year later. If you look at, or 2 years later, if you look at just the old age, this is the trust fund that pays for Social Security, that's supposed to run out in 2033. I think I said 2034, excuse me. Once depleted, it would only cover 81% of scheduled benefits. What does that mean? That means that the revenues coming in from payroll taxes are going to be sufficient to pay 81% of benefits. Why is it accelerated? Well, because of what we were talking about earlier, that Social Security Fairness Act, which has repealed the windfall elimination provision in the government pension offset, but also lower assumed fertility rates and changes in the labor share projections. So everyone, I'm sure, has heard about these dependency ratios, worker dependency ratios, and what's happened there. So that's not helping the Social Security Trust Fund either. So Leslie's written in the Q&A. Leslie, if you could keep questions to the chat window, that'd be great. Leslie's written, you can deal with this later. I've given up on the Philippines office. SSA has my birthday wrong, but that's no good. They have all the embassy certified documents to correct it. No, they sent to states for verification. All follow were met with automatic. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry to hear about that. I've got the same thing actually myself in a different way with Delta Airlines, where they screwed up my middle initial. It's actually never really been a problem, but to try and get that fixed is like it's like an act of Congress, trying to get that passed. Um, I think probably doing it in person would be my answer. Next time you're in the US, go to an SSA office with your passport, birth certificate, everything, and just say, let's please get this fixed now. That would be my recommendation. Okay, so today they're able to pay 100% of benefits. In the future, they're unable to pay that. So the 81% of benefits would continue to be paid. I guess this is the first statistic in the salvo I want to send at you as to why I don't think it's really going to be cut. 98% of the US population has never lived without Social Security. There's a lot of public support for it, 71%. That's a tiny, tiny group in opposition right there. So most people desire enhancements to the program, supporting older workers in physically demanding jobs who can't reach age 67 beyond the scope of today's presentation, but there is a reduction in benefits for income earned before your full retirement age. So if you take Social Security at age 62, or before your full retirement age and you work, then that is going to have an offset to your Social Security benefit before your full retirement age. So that's the context to that first bullet point you see there. Disability protection. 90% view disability insurance as vital. Me too. Count me in that group. That's absolutely vital. SSI reform. That's a different program. That was the acronym I was searching for previously. That's the Medicaid essentially. This is the very, very low income. You can see there $2,000 in assets is what you need to have to qualify for that, and eliminates or they want to get rid of marriage penalties that apply in that program. 85% of Americans prefer raising revenue to cutting benefits. And by the way, did I stare into my teacup and divine these numbers? No, this is taken from a CBO report and also another organization, National Association of Social Insurance, that did this mid last year. So that's where these stats come from. So a lot of support here. 82% prefer raising revenue to cutting benefits. So going back to Cecilia's question, which I get all the time, should I just hurry up and take it now? I don't think so, because it's not going to make much difference that I can see. National Academy of Social Insurance released this comprehensive report, which includes bipartisan support. Americans across party lines, generations, and income levels overwhelmingly support Social Security. 96% say it will be important to their retirement. Strong preference for revenue increases over benefit cuts. Americans favor raising revenues rather than cutting benefits to address the shortfall. And there will be an urgency for action, given that this bankruptcy is scheduled to occur before the program's 100th anniversary in 2035. So what are some of these policy options and what's preferred? Well, the revenue side options, as I've already alluded to. So raise or eliminate the wage-based cap. As people paying very, very close attention earlier would have noticed that you stop paying Social Security taxes at $184,500. That's really bizarre. Like in Australia, I can't think of any taxes that work quite well. I guess superannuation does. That goes up to $250,000, and the 12% match stops at that point. But it's just this bizarre tax where we've got plenty of clients that make more than that, and by some point in the year, this line item just falls off their pay stub. They stop paying it. So a proposal there would be to make 90% of all earnings subject to payroll tax. There's actually many proposals. There's another one where there's a donut hole where you stop at 184,500, but then it continues again at 400,000. So it is selectively targeting higher income earners. That's another option. Increase payroll tax rates modestly. So instead of 6.2, maybe it goes up to 7.1, for instance. Or another one is subject to high earners investment income. So keep in mind capital gains, dividends, rents, royalties. These are all thought to be investment income sources that are not subject to payroll taxes. Well, what if indeed they added a Social Security tax to those sources of income. Now, what's less popular are the benefit fixes that you see here. So some would say, well, gosh, why don't we cut the largesse of this program? There's a lot of waste. No doubt there's probably a bit of fraud as well, but people aren't in favor of that so much. Gradually raising full retirement age. I can understand why politicians are not in favor of that. This was proposed in the Macron government in France just a couple of years ago, and it led to street protests and burning tires and rubber bullets and tear gas and all the rest of it. People do not like, especially the French, do not like the idea of raising that retirement age, despite the fact that the world's first pension system, instituted by Otto von Bismarck back in 19th century Prussia, the pension age was something like 55. It was 50 or 55, but interestingly, life expectancy was a year or two less than that. Now we have this system where you retire full retirement age 67, as we see, and the average life expectancy is, I think it's 77, 78 for a man and 81 for a woman. But that is not the full picture, because if you look at the average life expectancy for annuitants, i.e., people that have more money, have enough money to purchase an annuity, it's a couple of years longer than that. So the average is brought down by the lowest income earning quartiles. As a shame as that may be, I'm just conveying facts here. So other options people don't like is reducing the cost of living adjustment, reducing benefits to those with higher income, as in means testing. That's an interesting one, why they don't like that. And that's what we have. Benefit adjustments with public support. So those are the benefit adjustments that don't have public support, and here are the benefit adjustments that do. Increase minimum benefits for low-wage workers. It's funny that they use benefit adjustments, because adjustment can be up or down, right? So this is more increasing the benefit. Provide caregiver credits for time out of workforce. Bridge the benefit for older workers in physically demanding jobs. Means testing high. Oh, I was wrong. Look at that. That does make its appearance back. Means testing high income beneficiaries. So maybe Warren Buffett and Bill Gates wouldn't get their Social Security checks. Improved COLA calculation to better reflect older American spending patterns. So to me, what is that? 4 out of 5 of these benefit adjustments are about enhancing the program and increasing spending, with the exception of this means testing for high income beneficiaries. By the way, Social Security stands in stark contrast to the aged pension in Australia, which is both. There's a triple test for it, which is very interesting. So that is, it's income tested. If you make too much money, you don't qualify. It's means tested. If you got too many assets, you don't qualify. And it's residency tested. If you're not living in Australia, you're not getting a benefit. So when I do webinars talking about, could you also get Social Security and an age pension? Yes, you could, but you don't want to, because it would mean a very, very low level of income. David Luskin has written in the Q&A, work experience subject to Social Security tax provides another potential benefit coverage on it. Yes, that's a good point. Yes, that's correct. 100% correct. That's right. Yes, if you have your Social Security, your 40 quarters, then yes, you qualify for Medicare. And the flip side of this one is a tricky one, David. I'll just mention this, and that is, doesn't happen often, but every now and again I'll hear of an older person that finds love later in life, and they say, gosh, we're going to move to the US and it's going to be great. Well, not so fast, because if that person moving to the US doesn't have, or whoever it is, doesn't have that Social Security earnings history, then they don't qualify for Medicare. And with a privatized healthcare system, I need only suggest what those monthly premiums would cost, given that a healthy couple client of mine were just saying as recently as 2 or 3 weeks ago that they paid, and still do, they're in COBRA for another few weeks. I think it was $4,000 a month is the health insurance premium. And that ain't even that's not even in a Medicare age. So you can only imagine how much that would be. This is another set of slides I wanted to add because I think this has caused a lot of sleepless nights for non-resident aliens, people abroad that rely on this Social Security benefit. So we had this gentleman from New Jersey, uh, Jeff Van Drew, who proposed the HR House Reform 1547, Social Security Reform Act of 2025, which would limit Social Security eligibility to US citizens or nationals only. Okay, so that's not good. But let's keep in mind that it's received no support and it has made no progress. It's been referred to the House committees, three different committees. Uh, Independent trackers estimate a 0% chance of enactment. You know, these things come along every now and again. There was another one in November from Ron Wyden, who said, what was that one about? That was, gosh, it's slipping my mind. I'm sure someone here will know what I'm talking about. It was, oh, that was it, the single citizenship. It was anyone with dual citizenship would be exited from the US system and have to pay an exit tax. That's not good. I don't like the sound of that. That would have tremendous consequences for many of my clients. Have I heard anything about this since that's come out? And it's my job to stay on top of these sorts of things. Not a peep. Same with this one. So it is concerning, but nothing's happened. Now, Trump came out in April with this memorandum instructing the Social Security Administration to ensure that ineligible non-citizens do not receive benefits. Well, great. That's the rule as it exists today. I mean, by definition, right? Ineligible. It says it right there. So if there is some of that fraud going on, then it shouldn't be happening. I don't think anyone disagrees with that particular point, but it's nothing new. Budget-driven cuts to the SSA have made things a little bit less efficient. Supposedly, I haven't noticed or heard of any major changes, just given the weeks that it normally takes to hear a response. Okay, so they're talking about terminating payments to representative pays without Social Security numbers. We'll get a Social Security number. That's or an ITIN as a way to get around that. So they're tightening overseas compliance, including faster suspension of proof of life forms or requested documents are delayed. Okay, so they're on the lookout. And I would certainly say this slide, what they're talking about here, things that are not changes in law, but are rather funding reductions or other softer ways of influencing policy, that could be changing. But given how important Social Security is, I just don't see that it's going to go away. And another strategy too for folks to consider is if you are approaching Social Security age and you have heard horrible things, if service at the OIEO deteriorates, then visit the US, go into a Social Security office when you're next there and describe your situation. I've had clients do that in the past. Okay, so what would it take to exclude non-residents? There would be a formal process that would need to follow, and that would be the core steps for a bill to take place to get rid of non-residents from Social Security. It'd have to be introduced into the House or Senate. There'd be a referral to committees to for debate, where that would be studied. There'd be hearings. It'd be marked up. They need to come up with an identical bill and then reconcile between chambers, and then it needs to be signed by the president, or a veto must be overridden by two-thirds. In practice, any major change is going to be it's going to be very difficult. And more often, as we saw last year with this so-called One Big Beautiful Act, it's more likely to be tied into a bigger entitlement reform package. That's how this is likely to be done, should it be done at all. So, what protection do beneficiaries have? As we saw in Fleming versus Nestor, the Supreme Court held that Social Security beneficiaries do not have a contractual or property right to benefits. That's what I mean. You've got a claim to a straw to take the money that you're entitled to, but that doesn't mean that you could sue if that was somehow not fulfilled. The Social Security Act expressly reserves to Congress the power to alter, amend, or repeal any provision. So this can't be done by the president alone. Paying Social Security tax does not guarantee a legally enforceable right. As I mentioned, courts review Social Security changes under a deferential, rational basis as long as Congress has a plausible policy justification. Benefit changes are likely to be upheld. Okay, so we've seen it's a pretty heavy lift for this to happen. If it was to happen, it would likely be as part of a broader entitlement reform. And I haven't heard much in the way of that in recent times. Um, Excuse me here. It looks like a slide got out of place. Oh, sorry. No, it didn't. I thought this belonged back in the totalization section. So the totalization agreement is another layer of protection. So the US could overrule that, but the sum of what this is saying is that it would breach international commitments and it would invite diplomatic friction. Not that that's held up this current administration from taking certain actions. But it would make across-the-board exclusion of non-resident treaty partner citizens legally possible, but politically and diplomatically costly. So Australia could turn around and do something to American holders of superannuation, possibly. I don't know. I shouldn't even speculate on that one, but that's the idea there is that there would be some tit for tat reaction, as we've seen with this expedition of European militaries heading to Greenland to say this is in fact Danish territory. Can the president do it alone? No, is the short answer here. Cannot act unilaterally to redefine eligibility for Social Security. It's set by Congress. Executive orders and memoranda can change how strictly Social Security Administration enforces existing rules or prioritizes certain cases, but cannot add new statutory requirements such as a citizenship test on their own. Okay, so I'm just seeing if there's anything else here. And so far, no, there's been no movement on that front. So what can Australians make of all of this? What are our takeaways from what we're seeing here? Well, a couple. Timeline matters it's actually 2033 depletion date. Clients currently in their 50s and 60s need to factor potential benefit reductions. That could certainly happen. So take 20% off what you're expected to get. That's one scenario. Another scenario would be you just assume you're going to get full benefits. And yet a third scenario would be partial reform. So maybe smaller cuts, higher taxes, something like that. We, as a matter of course, for the last couple of years, have already been running these benefit reductions when we do our client retirement income projections. So it's nothing new to us. And honestly, for most people that are watching this presentation, to see a 20% benefit cut in your Social Security is probably not going to be the make or break of your retirement plan. If you've got other assets to support retirement, then you're you're probably going to be fine with a little asterisk there. The fine being keep a watch on your expenses. That's really the thing you have the most significant control over. So what this means, action items here, claiming strategies, can consider claiming strategies given the uncertainty. That kind of goes back to Cecilia's question. I don't know if it matters a whole lot. Should you take it at age 62, 67, or 70? I I I don't think it matters. Maybe you'll get a little bit more money if you took it at age 62, and in the scenario that there was in fact a lasting benefit cut that then hit some number of years later. But even then, given the years that we're talking about, it's only going to be one or two. I'm not going to go into any more detail on that. Diversify income. Don't rely solely on Social Security. That's kind of what was indicated there at the beginning. It's really part of a tripod of retirement income sources. Plan for potential tax increases on higher earners, or the possibility of it at least. Superannuation, be sure to be funding that. That gets very complicated if you're an American, as I'm dealing with right now. That was really the last presentation I did back in December talking about that, where if you contribute too much, it can flip to become a foreign grantor trust and not an employee benefits trust. and be familiar with the totalization agreements and what impacts they might bring. So we have this love, thanks to AI and the amazing capabilities that are now offered. We've got this infographic that spells out much of what we've spoken about here today. You may like to pause the screen when this is available on YouTube to take a look. Where can you learn more? If you or someone you feel could be assisted by us, then please feel free to go to our website, click on the Get Started, complete that form, and then we'll find a time to talk and we'll see if we're a good fit. Next month's webinar, yes, I am doing one in March 17th in the US. That's the 18th in Australia. Now, do keep in mind, to avoid any confusion, that's 11:30 Brisbane time. Uh, it seems my marketing guy took that off. I always said 11:30 Brisbane, 12:30 in Sydney and Melbourne. What is it? It's like April 4th this year that daylight savings reverts. So the April webinar will be back to the same time. So next month's is about the exit tax. This is also a crowd pleaser. People are very interested in the exit tax. I'll be going through that in detail, talking about how it's calculated, who's affected by it, what impact would it have for your heirs, etc., etc. Okay, I'm going to go to the chat first because that's what I told everyone several times where to put questions and see what we have here. So the export authority coach, I didn't. This is interesting. I've never had this happen. The expert authority coach. Okay. Do we have to keep paying into Social Security if we live full time in Australia? No, you don't. I am self-employed in Australia and was told I need to keep paying into Social Security. I'm a few years away from being 67. So that depends. There is one scenario where that could make sense, and that would be is if according to the residency tiebreaker, you're still considered a US tax resident, then that would make sense. But if not, if you've moved to Australia and it's clear that your center of vital interests are in Australia, then you'd be an Australian tax resident and you'd need to localize to Australian payroll. So that would mean superannuation and Australian payroll taxes. You would stop paying on Social Security. Is that the best move for you? I can't really say. I don't have enough information about your situation to make a recommendation one way or the other. Brett writes, do you still have to do a US tax return if you have renounced being US a citizen and receive Social Security in Australia? Do they possibly take a percentage out? Yes, they do. That's a great question, Brett. I must have deleted that slide. So yes, they actually just take an amount out. I believe it's 15.5%. No doubt someone's going to write in just a second and correct me on that. Um, but you don't need to continue filing a US tax return. You're not a US tax resident. And for capital gains, dividends, capital gains are sourced to Australia. Dividends are withheld. Bank interest is withheld. So you would not need to file a US tax return. If you had significant assets, then that may be a situation where it could justify the professional fees of filing that tax return, but we don't see that very often. Takeaways from the meeting. Okay, great. So that's Helen Pitt there with her otter transcription. Um, David Luskin wrote in again, under the tax treaty, U.S. Social Security benefits paid to Australian residents are generally taxable only by the United States, not Australia. How does the U.S. tax these benefits if received? Well, actually, that was the same question that Brett asked. There's a withholding. 15.5 sounds like it's right, but 28.5 is in my head for some reason too. Whatever it is, and I'm pretty sure it's 15.5. It's withheld at source. You don't need to worry about it. I don't know if we have any other questions. That seems like it for the moment. You're welcome, expert authority. Anyone else? Nope. I'm going to say that's a wrap. And please do register for next month's presentation if that's of interest to you. And consider subscribing to that YouTube channel. Thank you so much and have a wonderful, yeah, talk to you later, Cecilia. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.